Greetings, minions! A lot has happened since I last spoke to you. We showcased a new Be My Horde trailer at the OTK Games Expo.
Are you ready to become a powerful, seductive necromancer and create your own horde of the undead? Then be sure to wishlist Be My Horde on Steam after watching their trailer.
And launch the game in early access on Steam. Now that the launch dust has settled, we've prepared a new video devlog, this time in cooperation with Davi Vasc, the composer who created the stunning music for Be My Horde. Prepare your ears as we dive deep into the musical aspects of our title. What were the main inspirations? What were the biggest challenges? What were the primary objectives of the composer while creating the score for Be My Horde? Watch the devlog to find out. Before that, a quick thank you for supporting this project. Every opinion and review you leave helps us greatly improve Be My Horde. We're working on some meaty updates that we hope you'll enjoy. We couldn't have dreamed of a better launch for our new game and the warm welcome we received from you. Without further ado, let's get back to the Symphony of the Undead. We need to start by presenting today's hero, Davi Vasc. He is a talented and experienced video game composer who has been fascinated by music in gaming pretty much from the start. You could say Davi was a unique child because while other kids listened to rock or pop, he was interested in something else.
When I was a kid and you know, all the other kids were listening to whatever else was going on at the time, I was listening to Chrono Trigger, you know, and I got into guitar classes. I was taking guitar lessons as a kid to play, you know, covers of, you know, Chrono Trigger, like Prog's theme on guitar. That's the stuff I was doing. So in a way, I always knew I liked video game music like more than anything else.
Becoming a game composer was a long and difficult journey. Davi started as a music teacher and then performed in a band. Simply put, he did everything one would expect from someone interested in music. Composing for video games? That doesn't sound like a serious job, Davi often heard. However, one cannot fight what the heart desires.
I have to be true to myself. I have to believe in myself at least once. At least once I have to be 100% true to myself and believe in this thing that I've always known I want to do. I decided to go for it, to go for becoming a game composer. And man, it's incredible when you let go of this self-doubt and you decide to dedicate yourself to this thing that you know is right for you. It's incredible how things change and how things start to go right, to work out, you know.
Being true to yourself is a beautiful message from Davi as he eventually became a game composer. And you'll never guess what his first gig as a full-time composer was.
The very first gig I got after becoming a full-time game composer, because, you know, there's a transition period. You have to be like part-time for a while to get gigs, to get a reputation. The first gig I got after becoming full-time was Realms of Magic from Polished Games.
Yes, Realms of Magic, our first game. Working with Davi on the soundtrack for this RPG was a pure pleasure for the team. We knew the Brazilian composer would be a perfect choice for our next project, Be My Horde. The game about the seductive necromancers is, for us, a field for experimentation, where we learn new things, test various solutions, and find our own way of making games. However, when it came to the soundtrack, we wanted to bet on something we were sure of, and we knew Davi would deliver. He rolled up his sleeves and started by finding the proper atmosphere for Be My Horde's music.
Aside from the more gameplay-specific things that I have to underline with the music, aesthetically, the music is all about Moriana, so we have to underline her personality, her image. There are contrasting elements to her, so she's brutal and merciless and violent in a way and has no reservations about, you know, killing like hordes of peasants. But she's also like sexy and alluring and mysterious and kind of sarcastic and ironic, has a sense of humor. So there's an interesting contrast there. So to portray that, I wanted to include that kind of contrast in the music in the form of using heavy metal, right? Which is the brutal, merciless, violent part, the aggressive part, and the more classical music, orchestral, mysterious, baroque part that is also included in the soundtrack. So I guess if I were to point out one thing, one kind of atmosphere that I wanted to portray with the soundtrack is this Moriana contrast of being alluring and feminine, and also being brutal and merciless.
Moriana's character was a huge influence on Davi's work. Heavy metal and classical music, this is the combination we trusted. Some initial ideas revolved around a retro-style track, like in the early Castlevania series. However, together with Davi, we quickly turned our attention to something like, what if a Doom and church music had a baby?
Musical tastes of the team in what relates to heavy metal was very aligned with my own tastes in the sense that I was surprised that a lot of the references that the team gave me was power metal bands, like the band Powerwolf was thrown around a lot at the early stages of brainstorming, and in general, from the heavy metal side, the influences were mostly power metal bands, Epica, and from my own experience, like bands like Rhapsody of Fire and Angra. This is the kind of kinds of bands that have this contrast that I talked about of something sophisticated in the form of classical music and classical harmony, classical melodies, and the brutality of heavy metal. So yeah, I was actually very surprised that the team had the same taste for heavy metal as I had. That was cool.
We had the tone and direction, but not everything was smooth sailing. Davi had to face the challenge that many others had before him. People working on outsourcing often join a project midway and must adapt to an established vision. This can be challenging.
With Be My Horde, I arrived when the work was already in progress, so I had to catch up with everybody else. And at the beginning, it was a little difficult, especially considering that Be My Horde is such a unique game. So I feel like it took me a couple weeks, I guess, to understand the game, to understand what the game required musically, and to catch up with everybody else, talk with everybody else, listen to you guys, to absorb all this information, to playing the game for a few days, to finally understand what the game needed musically.
However, our work structure at Polished Games really helped here. Anyone can speak their mind about any aspect of development. Designers can leave feedback on art, and artists can discuss design, etc. That was also the case with the music.
The team would have these meetings about the music, and everyone would decide what they liked and what they didn't like democratically. That was very interesting. In that sense, the music for Be My Horde is almost like it's being composed by the whole team as much as it's being composed by me. And I think that's really cool. That's probably the most interesting and unique thing that I've experienced in this process.
It may sound like a corporate slogan, but we believe people should communicate openly. Teamwork comes from understanding each other, and isolating ourselves only slows down the creative process. As Davi notes, sometimes we don't realize that others do not always think like we do.
Sometimes we have this mentality that what we're thinking is obvious and everybody else is thinking the same thing. But that's not true. Sometimes it's obvious to you, but it's not obvious to the other person. So if you don't speak your mind, if you don't express your ideas when you're working with a team, like sooner or later someone is gonna think that their obvious thing is also obvious to you when it's not, and then there's gonna be a mismatch of communication in there. So yeah, it's important to talk and to communicate a lot.
Davi Vasc managed to compose an astonishing track for Be My Horde. Thanks to the extraordinary combination of heavy metal and classical music and the attention to every detail, the soundtrack truly enriches the experience of becoming Moriana. You know you're doing a great job when the people you're working with are also your fans.
When Zach Harn sent me the first demo for Be My Horde, my intention was just playing for an hour to get a feel for what the game was. I ended up playing for the whole day, and it was a very early demo. There was not much to it, but the core foundation of the game was already there. And to me, I don't know if it's the same to you guys, but the way I related to the game was a sense of curiosity, a sense of experimentation as well, to see just how far I can take this snowball effect, of building your horde and making it go bigger and bigger and bigger, and just snowballing enemies, and just thinking to myself, they're not gonna let me make a horde as big as the whole screen. There's no way they're gonna do that. Or will they? Or will they let me do that? Hold on, I have to try it. I have to try it. And then building my horde, and making it go bigger and bigger. And when it suddenly reached the size of the entire screen, I was like, there's no way they can do that. If this is just a demo, like a very limited basic demo, I wonder what they will let me do in the full game.
What can you learn from this case? Be open, talk with the people you're working with, and trust them. What else did Davi teach us? Believe in your dreams.
I think it's important to be true to yourself, right? A lot of times we know what we want, we know what we like, we know what makes us happy, but there's so many noise, right, in our heads. So yeah, I'm glad I found my path.
This is just the beginning of Be My Horde's musical journey. Thanks to Davi's experience during early access, we'll create more unforgettable tracks. We highly recommend working with this artist, and you should also check out his YouTube channel, which offers interesting analyses and notes about gaming soundtracks. That's it for today. We hope you enjoyed this unique devlog. Please let us know if you liked it and what you would like us to cover in the next episode. In the meantime, create your own malevolent horde in Be My Horde. The game is available on Steam. Praise be Moriana.